Good evening, everybody, and welcome. This is a very casual evening, so if you think I really need some more falafel, feel free to get up and get some more falafel. We tried to create an opening here so you don't have to climb over your neighbors to get in and out. And this is not rehearsed at all, and so we have a variety of people from the trip that are just kind of share some stories and stuff like that. So folks from the trip, when you come up, and we'll give you a little holler when it's your turn. If you'll come up, this microphone will be on here, and if you have notes, there will be a music stand here for you. Pictures will be right up there if you need to point out stuff or whatever, and maybe introduce yourself, since not everybody knows you with the 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11 o'clock service things going on. So why don't we pray as we begin? And again, if you need to get up and get more food or use the restroom, there's coffee and hot water for tea and ice water out there also. Please help yourself. Let us pray. God, in the midst of this Holy Week, we thank you for your story that continues to unfold in our lives and in our time, and especially as we journey to the Holy Land during this moment, during this evening. We thank you for the stories that continue to come alive in us. Bless our time tonight and continue to open hearts and minds and lives as we hear your story once again. Amen. Hey, first of all, for those of you that stayed here and prayed us through our trip, holy smokes, no delays, no COVID, no broken bones walking down Mount of Olives, which is not what we saw with some of the other groups that were walking next to us. We used a lot of our first aid gear for some of the other groups that were tumbling down the Mount of Olives. So thank you for loving us and praying us through that. And you know that there's a difference between just taking a trip and taking some kind of a pilgrimage. And so this truly was a pilgrimage for us, seeking and hoping and praying and wondering for a variety of things. And so we're going to go quick tonight. There's 10 days worth of material, times however many of us were on the trip, and the stories could just go on and on and on and on. And so if you're trying to keep track of where we were and what we were doing and the names of places, John did a really great job during our trip of trying to document each day. And so you're like, what was that church that they went to, that one thing? You can go there and look that up, and then you can read online for days and days about that. Just as a way of kind of getting going, I don't even know what the first picture is. Is it the airport? Yeah, there it is. So we're standing in JFK. We had some tough decisions to make because some of us wanted to just go to Washington Reagan for 10 days and hang out, or maybe to Brazil. And so, like I said, all of our flights were on time and everything was great. And then when we arrived there, we were just greeted by, first of all, we traveled with a group of folks from Advent Lutheran in Upper Arlington. And then when we got there, the next day we met a couple of other churches whose pastor became ill right before the trip. And so there were 46 of us or something like that, a big old loaded bus that we traveled together. But this is right when we got to Israel. I think was this even before our test? Before our COVID test, yeah.
So we were still happy.
We were so happy. We were so rested in this moment.
Nothing had been
amazing.
Shoved up our noses.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't been on the bus yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, for farmers. Yeah. But your prayers reunited us.
Yes.
In Tel Aviv airport. Yeah. So then, then this was a view from our balcony. That's the Mediterranean Sea in Tel Aviv. That was the first night where we came. And so if we had to get tests for COVID here in the States, but then when we landed, we also had to have another test and had to quarantine in our hotel until we got the test results the next morning. And so we didn't get to go out and enjoy any nightlight that first night, but we did get to enjoy an evening meal in our rooms.
What a hardship it was
with
to have such
gorgeous
a view.
views. We were doing ministry for Jesus in Tel Aviv. So, yeah, so it was good. And so all over the place in the Holy Land, there are little scrolls. Some are very beautiful and manufactured. Some are metal, some are clay, some are wood. John Johns has one up here that you can see if you want to come up and look at that afterwards. And these are called mezuzahs, and so there's one right there. That was on our door the first night. Here's one in Tiberias, which is a metal one. And what it does is inside of there is Deuteronomy 6, written in there, the passage that says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, the Lord your God. Talk about these things when you are at home, when you're away, when you rise, when you lie down." And so it's this reminder on doorposts everywhere. Oh, that one's at Masada, that's right. Every time you go in and go out, it's this visible reminder about God's presence with you. And not only God's presence with you, but instruction for you to go and share God's word with those around you. And so there are two types if you were in the marketplace. The cheap ones just have a little printed one, but the expensive ones, like John's got, this is actually written by a rabbi, and then it rolls up and goes in there, and then you can mount it wherever. So those are called mezuzahs, and many of you, I would guess, have friends that have mezuzahs on their house, or lots of Christians sometimes put a cross over the door or something like that as a visible sign of that. So that was kind of our first day getting there and getting all settled in and everything. And then the next morning we just got up and got going. And the first place we went was Caesarea, which is right there on the sea, on the Mediterranean Sea. And this is the Colosseum there. We could spend the whole night talking about the archaeology at this place and showing you pictures from here. Just absolutely stunning way to begin our journey, but we just have a couple pictures of this Colosseum. So this is from down below up on what is the stage. And one of the reasons why we went there and why our guide took us there is because Pontius Pilate, this was where he was in charge of stuff. This is not by Jerusalem. This is not up against Jerusalem, but because of the unrest that we hear about in Scripture, they grabbed him and brought him down to Jerusalem to help take care of what the unrest that was happening around that Passover season with Jesus and his followers. So that's up at the top of Colosseum, and there's that guy down in the middle waving. That's John down there. Of course, in the orchestra pit, right? Where else would he be other than down there? And so you can see the Mediterranean Sea up there to the top and to the right. And then I think the last picture that I have here is one of the existing aqueducts from 2,000 years ago. If you can, in addition to all the other beautiful, powerful, amazing things that the Romans built, here's water delivery system that still continues to exist. And right through the arches there, you can see the Mediterranean Sea. And so it's not in use, as you might guess, but just goes on for miles and miles and miles. So that's me. Denise Krallman is going to take us to our next locale. Is that good?
Yeah, that's fine. I can probably vocalize it. So I have Tel Megiddo National Park. Tel means hill. Okay, that's Hebrew for hill. And this is you can go to the next slide. This looks down I call it a plateau. You know, if you think about plateaus or mesas, this is kind of what it was like. We climbed up. There were steps and ramps. Went through historical gates that were from 2,000 years ago, from the time, or before King Solomon had built to keep out intruders. And this is the top as we're up at the top. And this looks out into the valley of Jezreel Valley. And this is a pathway or a route that went from Egypt to Syria to Mesopotamia. This is, they went by this particular place. And in fact, there is the route that Jesus and his parents would have made when they returned from Egypt to go to Nazareth. They would have come right by this, would have been the pathway that they took. Do we have I think the next one's a little video or no.
Oh, yeah, I've got a video. Just a second. There we go.
Yeah, this is, so you can see here, we're sitting at the top, and you can see how, you can see Nazareth in the, over to, way over there.
Yep.
And that's Nazareth.
That's
And
Nazareth.
then,
The white part's
yeah,
to the left there.
yeah, to the left. And then actually kind of directly across from, right about there is actually the Holy Mountain, or Mount Tabor, which is where tradition says that's where the transfiguration occurred. So you can see there's a lot of visual kinds of things. Why one of the references, there are references to Megiddo, I think that's how you pronounce. I'm having difficulty pronouncing it. There are references in the Old Testament. And in addition, there's a reference in the New Testament in Revelations chapter 16, verse 16. And it's where they talk about Armageddon. This is where they place the Armageddon. It's a corruption of of Har Megiddo. And this is, so there it is. That's what we're saying here. This picture that you see is some of the excavation of the 20 different cities that were built one on top of each other over a period of about 5,000 years. And so they just build up, and this is the excavation there. It's an ongoing archaeology project. Then I think I have a couple of pictures of there's traditionally they say that this was a place where there was stables, King Solomon's horses. More recently, it says it probably is where they held grain and stuff. But this is a manger. This is a stone manger that was, I'm pointing here, you can't see here. This is a stone, they're pointing here. This is a stone manger. And one of the things our guide emphasized to us, which was kind of interesting over and over again, was the probability that the manger that Jesus was laid in was of stone, not of wood. So this is an example. There's Pastor Corey viewing the horse. Then finally, the last thing that we looked at we came to was the water system that they had at this location. Because it's up high and there's no water up there, King Ahab designed a way of tunnel and a shaft to bring in water from the springs that were at the bottom of the hill. But it was also used, we were told, as a way to escape if there were intruders breaking into, invaders coming into the city. If they got past the gates, this was how everybody escaped. And so we could walk down 30 meters, and here we are walking down the stairs, down, and it's steep. And that's I think Sue took this picture, Sue or Kay, and it's me right there in the kind of khaki pants. I think Lois and Jeff are right behind us, and this is what we're walking down. And when we get to the bottom, then there's another 70 meters of tunnel that there's that you can see where they've dug the trenches for the water to flow through. And then we come out at the end, and but it was quite a climb down, and it was, narrow steps, and it was fun. So we're good there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like coming to Denise Krallman's TED Talk. That's awesome. That's good. Hey, if you have questions in the middle of stuff too, feel free to interrupt, okay? Like I said, we're just blazing through stuff, and yeah. So then after that, we went to the Church of the Annunciation, and so this is in Nazareth, and this is the place where, okay, so you heard Denise say it, supposedly, okay, there's a lot of, we heard this 50 times a day. This is the traditional site, or supposedly, and so a lot of the places we went, this is a guess of what happened here. There are places where it's like, no, this is the Sea of Galilee. This is we don't know exactly which rocks Jesus stepped on, but this is where the Galilean ministry happened, or this is Masada, or this is the Jaffa Gate, that's been there for forever that we went in and out of in Jerusalem. And so the Church of the Annunciation is where the angel came to Mary and said, hey, guess what? You're the chosen one. And so this is in Nazareth. And so inside, we don't have any pictures, I don't think, of it down inside, but there's a place that they think was Mary's family home. It is in a cave down there. But at this place, there's this giant courtyard out there. And you can't really tell, but some of these murals are 30 feet tall out there. And they're murals from all around the world depicting that story in the art of that country. So here's Croatia, if you can't read that. And here's Slovenia. And here's Korea. I mean, just like this unbelievable art. And you can view all this stuff. If you look up Church of Annunciation panels or artwork, you can see all this stuff online, and it won't be as washed out as what you're seeing here. And so then after we viewed that courtyard, we went in and we went down and saw Mary's home, kind of in this dark basement area of a sanctuary. But then we walked outside of what is believed to be the city walls of Nazareth at that time. And there's part of the city wall where they think that perhaps Joseph's workshop was out there. And then that picture right before that, they're not quite sure if maybe this was Joseph's house or this was some other kind of ritual bath. You can see the stairs that are carved in stone there, going down into a little area there. And so there's just lots of speculation around a lot of this archaeological stuff. But it's just so cool to see these ancient things that are down in the basements. Like we would go into buildings and go down 2 or 3 flights of stairs to get down to them because the city has built up, just like Denise was talking about Tel Megiddo, and those layers upon layers that happened there too. So Nazareth, not really, it was kind of a shock to our system. I think we were all thinking like a little town of Bethlehem and little Nazareth, and it's like traffic jam, craziness. We got there at rush hour and it was just bananas. And then this is some more of the ruins there. And is this part of the outside of the Mary house?
That's
underneath the church,
Yeah.
right? Okay, great.
So what Johnny was saying, this would have been old Nazareth. We could think of little Jesus running around these little roads.
Right.
Little Jesus.
Yeah, so cool.
The missing years in the Bible.
Yeah. And then I'm going to pass it off to Kim here, who's going to take us to the Sea of Galilee.
Good evening. I'm Kim Barry. This is a little bit scary, but we'll see what happens here. So like I said, after we left Tel Aviv, we went to Tiberias. We went to our hotel, which actually sat right on the banks of the Sea of Galilee. And so all of our hotel rooms had the bird's eye view looking at the Sea of Galilee. We were that close to it. But like I said, this was the iconic Sea of Galilee. The miracles of Jesus walking on water, him telling the fishermen, throw your nets over the board, let's catch some more fish. It almost, sunk their ships almost. But did you know the Sea of Galilee is mentioned 67 times in the Bible? I Googled that, just so you know. I don't have that biblical knowledge, and if you think I'm smarter than Pastor Lowell, I'm not. But what I'd like to do right now is just read could have your time, just read a couple passages that apply to this. It's from John 6, just the first verse. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Tiberias, which is where we stayed. Now I'd like to go on to verse 16 through 21. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea rose because of a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat. They were frightened, but he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. That's exactly what we did. We sailed from Tiberias to Capernaum. So just imagine, we all could almost imagine we may even did the same path as Jesus. That's mind-boggling. So we are set up to do an excursion from Tiberias to Capernaum. So we left the dock probably about 7 a.m. We did everything first thing in the morning to avoid the crowds. It was kind of rainy. The sea was a little bit choppy. But we left, we took off. And then after about 10 minutes, this picture here, this is the Lord Alive gang on the bow of the boat, more towards the end of the trip. But after 10 minutes, I want you to notice the American red flag. After about 10 minutes, one of the ship's mates raised that flag up the mast, and then he played the national anthem for us. So we all stood up, put our hands on our hearts, and we sang the national anthem in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. How cool is that? That was cool. So then we continued on, and then about halfway we were going, the captain suddenly shut the engine off the boat. He said we're out of gas. Funny guy. But what happened was then Pastor Lane said, you know what? We're just going to drift here for 10 to 15 minutes. And I swear, the sea just calmed to a glass. There was no wind, no sound. It was just so surreal. But Pastor Lane said, let's just immerse yourself in the thoughts of Jesus walking towards you on the boat and him walking on the water and crossing the Sea of Capernaum. So it was just very surreal. We did that for about 10, 15 minutes. Then after that, we continued on. And then our tour guide took over, Johnny. Now, Johnny, he's a lifetime resident of Jerusalem. He had like 33 plus years of being a tour guide. So the information he had about the Holy Land was mind-boggling, just unending. But he said a funny thing happened on one of his previous tours. He said that they were doing the same path. They got out to the middle of the Sea of Galilee, shut the engine off, and were just drifting. And all of a sudden, they heard a big splash in the water. So they went and looked over the boat, and there was an elderly man. I guess he felt the presence of Jesus so much, he thought he could walk on water. But obviously, he couldn't. But Johnny had a lot of good stories, so you just have to take that one with a grain of salt. Let's see here, that was it. So then we just went on and finished the trip to Capernaum. So just one last note I'd like to say. For me, in the future, whenever I hear Pastor Lowell mention the Sea of Galilee, like in the lesson or the gospel or a sermon, I'm going to think, I was there. In fact, all of us on the tour got a certificate of authenticity that we sailed on the Sea of Galilee on March 18th, 2022. It was a trip to remember. Thank you.
All right. Up next, I ruined all the lighting, so I just get to sit in the dark, which is fine. I'll fix the lighting during the next speaker. I didn't prepare any of my remarks, so I'm just going off what I remember. So our next stop. So this is we've taken the boat across the sea, and our very first stop was the Church of St. Peter, and this was one of the top 10 moments for me on the trip, and I think a lot of my moments were Peter-related moments. My dog's name's Peter, and the moments, I don't think the moments were favorites because my dog's name is Peter. I think I named my dog Peter because of this. But this is the Church of St. Peter, and the verse in the Bible where we talk about St. Peter is from John 1:42, and Jesus renames Simon Peter, which is Cephas, and it means rock. So he's calling Peter the rock. And so here's this church that is literally built on a rock. And this rock sits right in the middle of the floor. You can't do anything. You can't walk into the church without having to walk around this rock. From the outside of the building, if you look to the right, you can see more of the rock and the steps leading down into the sea. You can just kind of see the sea. It was very hazy that day in the background. And I've got a better picture here. So these are the same steps, same rock. It just kind of goes up through that door. So the rock, the steps and the rock were existing. They built that door and the church around the rock. And it's just fantastic because it's just one of those spots where it really brings this story. That's why I wanted to make sure the verse was up there. Eventually I ran out of time. Not all the slides have verses on them. But this was one of those really powerful moments where it's like, wow, the church built on the rock. And there were things where I think maybe our tour guide said them, and they just got lost because there were just so many things. But this was one of those things that stuck with me. So after we left Peter's church, we went to the city of Capernaum, which is really Simon's hometown. And you can see here the white stones. Oh, I'm doing the same thing Denise was doing. The white stones are the synagogue, the temple. This is really mostly a newer temple than Jesus' time by a couple hundred years. Where you see kind of that black line going across, everything from that black line and down is the older part of the temple that would have been from Jesus' time. And it is biblical that he would have attended that temple at some point and probably taught at least a little bit at some point at that temple. And he did. He made his home there. The dark ruins that you can see here toward the bottom, that's all housing. Johnny said that it's probably 2 or 3 homes that you can see right there in that space. And the wealthier people would have lived near the temple. None of this is the exciting part to me yet, because here's the next Peter moment. Capernaum, get through my slides. Here we go. So this is the site, this is Peter's house. And you can't really tell which walls were really Peter's house and which walls were built up with churches that were built on top of Peter's house. But this is where not only Peter lived, but as Jesus began his ministry, people started congregating here. So effectively, this is the first church. Like, this is the first Christian church. And that's another thing, like, I'm sure Johnny said it, but I think it got lost a little bit because we spent a lot of time at that temple, and we didn't spend that much time hanging out at this, which I thought was really, really exciting. But like I said, after leaving the synagogue, he entered Simon's house, Peter's house. And so this was one of the first miracles that we hear of where Simon's mother-in-law is sick, and he cures her of a fever. Also in Capernaum, we hear about the centurion whose servant was sick, and Jesus heals him. That would have been, I'm going back to this other slide. You can see all the way in the background, there's a wall behind the temple, that kind of dark wall that is back. The centurion would have lived outside that wall. He wasn't one of us. He wasn't one of the cool kids. So he would have been out there. Jesus left the town proper to heal, he cast a miracle outside the wall to heal the centurion. And there's several other miracles that are attributed to Capernaum, and so much ministry that this was this was the hub. Capernaum was the hub. So this was a really powerful spot. We had a lot of time to kind of hang out here. It was really drizzly. I held a cat for 20 minutes. There's a whole other slideshow that you guys don't get to see tonight. It's just cats. Cats of Jerusalem. Hundreds of pictures. So, yeah, no, I'm not kidding. So our next stop is the Mount of Beatitudes, another significant spot in Jesus' ministry. So this is kind of what I picture when I think, Mount of Beatitudes. We're sitting on a hill and everything. And of course, now they've built a church, which is kind of, from this picture, the church is to the left of what you can see. It's just another modern-ish church. So we didn't keep a lot of those pictures in this slideshow because there are just so many of them. But what is significant about this church, this is one of, I think, 2 churches we saw where you can see the altar here. This altar faces both directions. The priest can preside in either direction. One direction faces Jerusalem, and the other direction faces the way Jesus would have faced the crowd, allegedly. So that's why the architect had to get special dispensation from the Pope to do that. That's why he only did it in two of the churches. So it's a really big deal that this happened. Not many churches, and this was before altars were pulled out from the wall. A lot of us don't remember that altars used to be back up against the wall. But when altars used to be back up against the wall, this is an altar that got to be pulled out right away, and the priest could celebrate the Mass from either side. So this was a big deal. Next, we packed a lot into
Hey,
these.
one more quick thing
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
that. Out of this whole Holy Land trip, I mean, pretty big area.
Oh, yeah.
We ran into Alma Utrecht's son, Bill Utrecht, standing right there. He's on another pilgrimage. We're standing there, and it's like, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So very cool. He's a pastor up in Michigan and was part of another trip. So,
Yeah. Crazy. Our next stop was Tabgha. It's spelled Tabgha. This is where I've run out of time to put actual notes on the slides. And this is where the miracle of the loaves and the fishes should have been performed. So there's a rock here under the altar, and that's where the loaves and fishes would have been divided. And you can kind of see, I'm taking this picture from as close as I could get, but you can kind of see in the mosaic the basket in the middle and a fish on either side, representing the miracle there. So after that, go ahead. Yeah.
Add something. There's only 4 loaves in the basket because the 5th loaf is on the table for communion.
Nice. I didn't know that. I didn't catch that. All of the things I've talked about happened before lunch this day. And the only reason I remember this is because the next picture is lunch, which I didn't eat because I don't like fish. And I especially don't like when my fish looks like this. I really, really, really don't like knowing what my food was before I eat it. Brian, actually, I make Brian pick the chicken off the bone because I just can't do it. So, this is called, what was it, Peter's fish? St. Peter's fish. Yeah, it's a type of tilapia, ew. But those who ate it were encouraged to not use that fork that's in the picture, but rather to pick it up and eat it with hands the way Jesus would have eaten it. Apparently, this person chose the fork instead, which is fine with me. And then we move on to the next person who... Yes, we're at the wedding of Cana. Yep.
So, read passage from John chapter 2, starting at the first verse. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. Our group arrived at the wedding church in Cana on the third day. We were in Israel, which is believed to be the site of Jesus' first miracle. So before our trip, I had discussed with Pastor Lowell about the possibility of Lois and I renewing our wedding vows in this special place. And of course, he was more than accommodating. And I did ask Lois before doing this, if she would be so obliged to,
Will you
renew our
marry me
vows before
again?
40-some people. But it was such a blessing to be able to share this day as we, if you want to flip a couple slides, we actually ended up renewing our vows. This was...
This is all inside the church.
inside,
so
yeah.
there
We
go.
end up renewing our vows this day with 6 other couples that joined us, including Kim and Jill from our church. And Pastor Lowell was nice enough to preside over the ceremony. And this was down below the church. I think we've kind of skipped over it. This is Pastor Aaron and his wife that are renewing their vows. And Corey's in the background saying, when is the reception going to start? I think that's what he was thinking, so. And as we know, the rest of the story, chapter 2, continues. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come," his mother said to the servants. "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washings, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. And so this was one of the water jars that were down where we renewed our vows, and some other, artifacts down there as well. Jesus went on to say to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," so that they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Like I said, I think between Lois and I, we'll both remember this time and place every time we hear, John chapter 2 read. And I also want to thank Pastor Lowell for, presiding over this, and, Johnny, talking to his sister to allow us to do this in the basement, before the next tour group came in. So all of you may know me well enough that I can say, finally you might ask, did we try the wine in Galilee, or in Cana? We were told if you drank a bottle of Cana wine today, you'd probably need a bottle of Advil tomorrow. So I did not try any Cana wine. So.
Thank you, Jeff. And Lori Vesper, you're up. All right.
This is not Cana. Hi, I'm Lori. Pastor Lowell hinted at this earlier. When you go to the Holy Lands, you are going to hear people say, your guide in particular, that archaeologists and biblical scholars believe this happened here. And we did hear that a lot. But what great resources to have explaining about the area than archaeologists and biblical scholars. So for some reason, I really took to the waters. I loved seeing the Mediterranean Sea, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Jordan River. For some reason, you can't argue with those. I don't need an archaeologist to tell me that's the Mediterranean Sea.
Right.
It was out our window. Someone showed you that, a nice picture. I put this map up here just to try to put things into perspective. I'm kind of a visual person. I need to see maps. So the large body of water just south of the word Jerusalem is the Dead Sea. But there's a line that goes up from the Dead Sea north between Jordan and Israel, and that's the Jordan River. It is a tributary into the Dead Sea. And when we were on our bus heading to the Jordan River, our guide pointed out several times where we could see the Jordan River, and it was this big, just off on the side, little parts where it was going. So shorelines don't change, or they do a little bit over time, and the Jordan River has changed, of course, over time, but seeing it,
There.
for some reason, for me, this is exactly how I imagined it. For decades, I'm decades old. And this is I don't know what it was about this, but the tall grasses, the bushes, even the people wearing their white baptismal gowns, even that it was muddy and not real wide, it just, for some reason, that picture really spoke to me. I don't know if you can see, but behind the people there is a rope with weights, and that is dividing Israel and Jordan. So this is definitely a line between the two countries. This picture is showing really three different parts of the Holy Land that I really like this picture. It has the flag of Israel, and across the river is the flag of Jordan, and we're standing in Palestinian-occupied West Bank in Israel. So I just liked all of the different parts of the world coming together in that one picture. That is a Greek Orthodox church in Jordan, and they were conducting a ceremony that day.
Just a second. It's being a little sketchy. It doesn't like that we have 200 pictures to show you.
That's okay. I think it's just a picture of me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we're almost there.
So one of my goals to bring home a souvenir of the Jordan River was river water, and that's me. I had just collected it, and at this point, I don't know if it's going to make it home, but I had packed a really small fleece blanket, and then, of course, thanks to American Airlines, I took one of their blankets, and I was able to wrap this. But you know, your luggage gets inspected, and I didn't know until I got home that my Jordan River water made it home, and we're going to use it to baptize our grandchildren.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Lori. Okay.
I just thought of something really important that I have on my notes, and I want to do a special thank you to Pastor Lowell and the other two pastors, Corey and Aaron. They did a lot of things during our trip that made it extra memorable. And thank you, because at the Jordan River, he put the sign of the cross on our forehead to remind us of our baptism, and he used Jordan River water. So that was really special, and thank you.
And I didn't even preach. Right? Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, oh, this is so fun. This is so fun. So that was in the morning. If you remember the map, right? We woke up that morning up at the Sea of Galilee. We boogied down the Jordan River, right? Did this thing. And then our afternoon that day, we were going to head into Jerusalem for the first time. And so that was kind of like waiting. We were doing all this other stuff, skirting around, and then here comes Jerusalem. And I think all of us, I had been there before, and still, my mind was blown again. I think we had no idea what it was going to be like, how crowded it was going to be, how bustling it was going to be, that there's this collision of ancient and modern, like right there in the moment. And so our bus dropped us off, and then we had to walk around a little bit. And so here we're walking around. This right here, oh, back up one, John, there. Okay, this is right before we're going into the Lion's Gate. And as we were turning around, you can see all the bus traffic over there from all the tourists. And that is the Mount of Olives. So the left half, where the trees are, is Mount of Olives stuff, but also the right side is Mount of Olives, but that's all Jewish cemetery, that right side. It looks like it might just be sand or dirt, but it's actually, the tombs are down beneath, and then there's structures on top of the tombs. And so you'll hear more about the Mount of Olives as we go on. But then we went in the Lion's Gate, which is sort of facing the Mount of Olives. And so here we are coming down the stairs. There we are going in there. You can't really see it, but up on oh, there it is. John did do that. What? John's going to talk about tattoos in a little bit. And John has a tattoo of the lion from the Lion's Gate on his arm. And so it looks like this. It's really just a cat. It's really just a cat, but we're letting John think it's a lion from the Lion's Gate, okay? So just so you guys know when he saw Lion's Gate in a little bit, okay? So we went in the Lion's Gate, and just inside the gate, so these, like the gate into the walled city of Jerusalem, and here we are. Traffic, yes, I know, going both ways, and then pedestrian traffic. Okay, so super bonkers. We almost lost like 11 of the old people in this moment, but it all worked okay. People jumped over cars and everything. But our goal was just to be in the city of Jerusalem for a little bit on this day, and we wanted to go to St. Anne's Church, and that is where Mary's family lived, and where Mary may have been born here in this place. And so as you see these places, as John mentioned and some other people mentioned also, you see all these modern buildings. And so what's happened over time was somebody would say, oh, this is a holy place. And so people would mark that, and okay, this is a holy place. But then somebody would be like, we really should build a little something, okay? And so they build a little something, and then some kind of war would happen, and that place would get leveled, and then somebody else would say, oh, well, there used to be a thing here. We should build another thing. And so one of the things that we saw here, our very first day in Jerusalem, is just layer after layer of all these different cathedrals that had been built on this site, celebrating the birthplace of Mary. And so it was really just fascinating you can see some of our people down there, down in some what now is subterranean archway, from a previous building, and then building upon building. There's a cistern. You can't really read that, but it says from the 1st century BC. Actually, I wanted to say a lot of times in the church and historically we've learned about BC, before Christ, and AD in the year of our Lord. A lot of scholarship has changed to before the Common Era, BCE, and then CE, Common Era. So if you see on some of the signage that distinction, like right here it says 1 BCE, that's if you can still think of it in that 100 years before the birth of Christ, but way down there, and it's hard to see from here, but that's probably 25 or 30 feet down, is a giant cistern that's covered in moss way down there. So that was our time at St. Anne, and then we boogied over to Beth. Oh, that's our guide, Johnny. I don't know that you met Johnny yet. That's our guide, Johnny. One of the few times that he grabbed somebody else's camera and took a photo there, and this is the gorgeous courtyard there at St. Anne Church. So then we headed back out from St. Anne, and we went to Bethlehem that afternoon. And so this is what's called the Church of the Nativity, and it's actually several churches that are kind of nestled in this area. And one of the things that happens a lot is, you might not know this, but different Christians don't all get along everywhere. Did you know this? That yeah, and so it is over there too. There's all kinds of different, not only religions that are fighting for territory, but even Christian denominations that are battling over space. And so that's one of the things that's happening here too. And so as we were in there, there are parts of the Church of the Nativity, and I don't know that we captured it. It's such a massive space, it's hard to capture. Yeah, stay there 1 second, John, because I want to talk about that too. There are parts of it that have been beautifully restored and remodeled and are just elegant, and there are other places where there's a ladder sitting there with a paintbrush that hasn't been touched for 40 years because people are fighting over, well, I don't know that you have permission to paint this wall over here. And so it's just really strange. Okay, right here, you can see the old arch that's way up there, right? Do you see that? All the way up there, 4 or 5 feet above the tallest gentleman's head. That used to be the original entryway, okay? But different people would come in who wanted to cause harm in this holy site ride horses in there and things like that. So they lowered the door. You can see the second door there that would have been a normal human height about, and that still caused some issues. And so they lowered it now where you have to bow. That's one of the stories. The other story is that to come into the birthplace of Jesus, everyone needs to bow, which I like that one a little bit better than marauders coming in to tear up the Church of the Nativity. And so this is where we went in. And then when you get in there, it's just this massive space with no pews and just all the elegance and, I guess I heard some of our people say how gaudy it was, with all the gold and the incense and the candles and all this things, a lot of the stuff that we as North American ELCA people don't use in worship. And here's a close-up, right? This is up in the chancel area. So if you could step into this picture, that would be the giant wall behind the altar in that space. And this is just as we're getting ready to go down into the traditional site of where Jesus was born. Now down in here, there's two different places. There's the place where Jesus was born, which is here. Yep. And then the place where Mary laid Jesus. So those are two different holy places that are down here, and this is a good, story or a little bit more underground. And so this idea, and we've talked about this here in worship before, that it was more likely that Jesus was born in some sort of a cave than what we think about the barn out behind the house, kind of a scenario. And so just a really beautiful and holy space. And it was really fascinating because as we came up from being down there, Johnny wanted to tell us some stories, and there was a funeral that was starting in one of the adjacent chapels. And so they came in. This, I don't know if you can tell, but this is just the lid for the coffin. They processed. Do you have a picture of the actual coffin, John?
No, I didn't think that
So
would
they
be.
processed in with this person in a coffin, just flowers everywhere that had been thrown in there. And there weren't too many people at the funeral procession and not too much sorrow. And Johnny kind of hushed in a hushed tone to us said, if there's not a lot of people here, that means that this is an older person who lived a good life, and people are happy that this person's now with Jesus. If it were a younger person, there'd be a lot more grieving and everything. And then also the other thing that he mentioned was usually during the funeral procession, the men are doing the carrying, the women meet at the sanctuary, and then only the men process to the cemetery. The women go and get the food ready and some of those things that are more what we would think of, in that culture and era, stereotypical roles for people. So. Yeah, what else do you have up there, John?
That's it.
That was it. Okay. All right. So now Rosemary's going to talk to us about shepherds and some other good stuff. I keep forgetting this.
Okay. I come to the 8 o'clock service. I guess for me, every day that we had provided us with a walk through the history of Christianity. We found ourselves walking in the footsteps of Jesus from the small town of Nazareth onto Capernaum, the sites of his miracles, his teachings, and to his place of his last days. I really believe that each one of us had experienced unexpected emotions at unexpected times. So I'm going to speak to you today about something a little different. As we were about to begin our adventure, we had this beautiful motor coach that was waiting for us, and Pilvi and I was probably one of the last to board the bus. It almost became a habit of ours. As we boarded, we noticed that the bus was quite full. So we're standing in the front of the bus, and we look down, and there's the 2 front seats that are vacant. So Pilvi decided this was going to be our spot for the trip. So at that point, I was like, and then I was like, now I look back and I say, that was a true gift. Being in the front, we were able to experience all the beautiful views during our travels from one place to the next. We experienced the backdrops of desolate countryside, the shepherds with their flocks walking along the road. You could see like from the front of the bus, and there they are, just walking in the middle of the street, and there he is, taking care of everybody. And then we were driving alongside the stunning turquoise blue Dead Sea. It was so beautiful, so beautiful. We were experiencing this country outside of all these awesome tourist spots. One afternoon, we visited the Shepherd's Field Chapel in southeast Bethlehem in the West Bank in Palestine. This chapel marks the place where the angels first announced the birth of Christ. As our bus pulls up, there standing is this young boy with his baby lamb. Obviously, he was waiting for our arrival. Well, he was so sweet. So was his lamb. I am certain he was there in hopes that someone from this bus was going to give him a little bit of attention. I thought to myself that this little guy was quite the entrepreneur. And I must say that he really did get our attention. He was so sweet. On a side note, you might have caught a glimpse of these two familiar faces with the boy and his lamb. His warm smile and sweet disposition was pure joy. After we left, I was thinking, this is this little boy's life. I could not help think that he and his family are counting on us getting his attention. Palestine consists of the West Bank and Gaza. Approximately 4.5 million Palestinians live in this occupied territory. This territory currently has an unemployment rate of 43%. Each day we would pass through checkpoints before re-entering Israel. The Israeli military police staff these checkpoints. When I came home, I looked this up and I learned that there are 593 checkpoints and roadblocks scattered throughout the West Bank. These checkpoints and permanent roadblocks were established in the early 1990s, which really isn't too long ago. As we were leaving Palestine one afternoon, we passed through a checkpoint. Sadly, by this time, it was really becoming the norm for us to pass these checkpoints. But this afternoon was a bit different from our previous stops. For the first time, the two officers decided to come aboard our bus. Quite honestly, at this moment, Pilvi and I are thinking, maybe we're not so fortunate to have these front seats. As they entered the bus, they announced that they want to see everyone's passport. Our driver, Hadir, and tour guide, Johnny, informed them that there was no need for them to see our passports and they had no business on our bus, and they asked them to leave. Thankfully, they both made their exit, but as they made their exit, I noticed how they were both laughing. It was obvious they were aware of the power they had. These two young men were so intimidating to me. I can assure you it wasn't their stature. There were several factors that were so intimidating to me. Their youth, the semi-automatic rifles which laid across their shoulders, bulletproof vests, additional handguns on their side. And here we are, a bus full of Christian pilgrims. This is what gave them their power. When riding through the same countryside, we see settlements of families living on makeshift shelters on the hillside. Some of the areas are so desolate as far as the eye can see, true shepherds attending their flock of sheep and goats. Okay, Eloise. A completely different way of life, a completely way of life and culture. Amidst all the sights that truly take your breath away, the ancient history of this land, the birthplace of Christianity, we also witness poverty, suffering, and tension. I was truly, truly grateful that we did get to experience this part of the trip. This was definitely a trip of a lifetime. We were blessed with such a wonderful group, blessed to have Lowell and Aaron and Corey with us. We experienced laughter, adventure, reverent times, a safe journey. We made new friendships, and now we have so many special memories. I would recommend each one of you, if you have the opportunity, take the journey. It's an amazing one. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, I think you are first, right? And then Sue after that. Yep.
Okay. Oh, it's right up here. I'm Kathy Kiesling, and I'm an 8 o'clocker. Yay. I know a lot of people don't like getting up, but I do. So my highlight of the trip was Masada. It's this is up on a mountain, and it overlooks the mountains. And for me, this was so surreal. From the minute I got off the tram and the wind was blowing, it was so cold that day too. It's freezing. It reminded me of another time in another place. And it reminded me of a trip that I took with my parents. And I lost both my parents. My dad recently and my mom a couple years ago. So it was so comforting for me there. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. It was so surreal. It was so calming, just looking at the mountains. I could have stayed there all day, but I think Johnny was going, come on, let's go. We're going to the next place. So I couldn't. It's just one of the most beautiful places. And it's up in the mountains so that they could see their enemies coming. And all around it, I don't know, do we have other pictures? Yeah, this is my mountain picture. I love mountains. But it's up on a mountain, and there's water in the front, and then there's mountains in the back. And it's a really cool place, I thought. And Sue's going to talk more about it.
Well, I was really blessed that this was my second tour. And initially, Masada wasn't really on the agenda. I'm sorry. I just can't see. And I was really thrilled when I found that we were going to get to go a second time. Actually, the first time I was so petrified of, well, I'm always petrified of heights, and that includes gondolas and elevators. And this had quite the extreme gondola to get up to this peak that's several thousand feet high. It just rises up from the Dead Sea. And a little history was it Herod the Great. He was intrigued by the mountain itself, that he, 20 some years prior to Christ, he built a palace up there. It was his retreat. And he put a lot of work into building the watershed, the cisterns, and making it inhabitable. He had quite a lot of supplies up there. It was, like I said, it was a retreat. So in 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, approximately 900 zealots, Jewish refugees, went to Masada, and at that time the only way to get up there was a little pathway, and they were able to stay up there for 3 years before the Romans were able to come up there, and they built a ramp, which I don't guess you can see anymore, but they built a stone ramp, and they eventually got up there, and by that time they had all committed suicide. So it really wasn't inhabited except by Bedouins and cave people for several thousand years. About 1960, there was a renewed interest in Masada. So they once again came up, and they were able to find an abandoned or a very ancient synagogue up on top. And they also had a couple scrolls, ancient scrolls up there. And in 2004, they decided to modernize the synagogue itself. And they made it quite nice. A little air-conditioned room.
they said it's kind of like being in a fishbowl. But now they have these scribes, they're actually rabbis, and they come up and they spend 7.5 hours every day copying the Torah. And there's over 300,000 letters or symbols in a Torah, so this is quite the job. And so they sit up there all day doing this, and this guy's name was Rabbi Shimshon Israeli. And he was very friendly, and not everybody found his little synagogue. And if you were fortunate enough to do it, he would talk to you, and he would give you a little note. He asked your name, and then my name's up there, those 2 little letters. I don't know if it's Arabic or whatever. And then had I been married, he would have put my husband's name up there as well. Several of us were fortunate enough to get these. So I felt really blessed, number one, to find him, and then to get that too. When they finish a Torah, they donate it to schools and different places within Israel itself. And there's actually a website you can go to, and they will, for a little bit of money, write a letter, dedicate one of the letters that they put, single letters, into the Torahs to you, and you get a certificate. And if you're interested, I can give you the website, because it's really a neat gift for somebody. You get to think that your donation has added to a Torah. So I'm going to be going to a bat mitzvah in about a month, so I'm going to do this for this young girl.
Cool.
So. It's Jewish now, and that's part of the significance of being up on the mountaintop now writing Torah, because for so many, hundreds, thousands years, it was kind of a symbol of death and defeat to the Jews. And now to have this, dedicated spot up there and actually be writing Torah, it's like they've retaken the spot.
Thank you, Sue. Scott, I would say that there is remnants, ruins of a Crusader church up there, and that was one of the first places when we went up there to gather in this little spot, and there's a gorgeous mosaic up there that was not found for many years, and when I studied over there during undergrad, and our professor had a cloth with her, a New Testament professor, and she poured some water on there and went over to the mosaic and wiped it, and it's as if it was built today. I mean, like just wiping that dust off is stunning, absolutely stunning. So yeah, so then after Masada, we went just up the western shore of the Dead Sea a little bit, up to a place called Qumran, and you may recognize this picture because anytime anybody talks about the Dead Sea Scrolls, they usually show this picture. And so for a long time, Qumran is kind of the area there. And there was a boy a little shepherd boy, and his animals walked away from him. And so he was trying to chase him out of some of these caves. There's just caves all over the place up here. And so he threw a little rock up there, and he heard something shatter. And a variety of different things happened, but basically they just found a bunch of scrolls inside these ceramic tubes up there, and it's really fascinating to go on and read about the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's not time to explain the whole thing, but basically in 11 different caves, they found 981 different chunks of scripture, and some of those scrolls were still complete. Like there's a complete book of Isaiah that was found up in here. And there were remnants, fragments of every Old Testament book, as well as some extra books that aren't in the Old Testament. Is that the best way to say that, I guess? Yeah. Okay. This is just a fabrication. The actual Dead Sea Scrolls are in Jerusalem, I think in the Israel Museum. Some of you went and saw that. Yeah. But all the books of the Old Testament and then some extra ones, except for the book of Esther. So lots and lots of stuff, and it's really fascinating stuff. And I was just talking with the quilters the other day that some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they're complete, give us a new picture and new ways to think about some of the Hebrew and Aramaic, because before, these scrolls are older than some of the oldest ones that we had prior to that. So some of these scrolls date back to the 3rd century BC. And this was just, when we're talking about things that aren't so old, this just happened in 1946 and 47. So there's lots of people that think there are a whole bunch more caves out there with more scrolls that might have manuscripts that are older that we might find, in our coming lifetime. And then one of the things that Johnny said too was because of the harsh conditions out there in the wilderness and right on the shores of the Dead Sea, probably in the next, 60 or 80 years that cave is not going to exist because it's going to erode away. And so you can see in that picture just the erosion that's happening. So then after that, we ate lunch there and filled up our tummies, and then we waited a half an hour, and then we went to the Dead Sea and went swimming at the Dead Sea. And so it's just a super fun place. If you know anything about it, the saline is so potent there that you can't sink. They tell you not to get your face in the water. There's eye washing stations on the beach there. You're not supposed to shave the day ahead because it just will burn like a bugger. And so here's the dock that comes out to where we were. You could walk in or you could go out there. Now you can't really see the building, but if you look up there where those white triangle tents are up there, there's a guard station up there that was built up there 27 years ago, and that's where the water level of the Dead Sea was 27 years ago up there. And so it's just drying up. Why is the Dead Sea? Because it doesn't have an outlet. So water comes into the Sea of Galilee and it flows out. And so life can thrive there. And it comes down the Jordan, and this is a dead end. And so it's just, there is nothing that can live there. So there's no fish, there's no algae, there's no nothing in the Dead Sea. And also there, I think isn't there a picture of Jeff Hills? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. That's right. The lowest bar in the world, 420 feet below sea level, and that wasn't even down by where the water was. So.
Yeah, if you go swimming in the Dead Sea and then get a margarita at the lowest bar in the world, you don't have to have them rim your glass. You just lick your hand and drink the margarita.
There you go. All right,
Totally
so then
fine.
from there, we took showers there and everything, and then we went to Jericho. And so this is Jericho, coming on into Jericho. And so as we came in, we just boogied through Jericho. We slowed down long enough to say, hey, there's a sycamore tree, not the one that Zacchaeus climbed, but there's a sycamore tree. And then we went out to the Mount of Temptation. Oh, and here's some shepherd doing the goat business there in the field. Little afternoon hangout. And then Mount of Temptation, you can see there's a monastery that is built up on there. And so this is believed to, when Jesus was led out into the wilderness after his baptism, that this is the Mount of Temptation. You know, the different Bible verses have a little bit of different things. The different Matthew, Mark, and Luke have different things happening in that temptation moment, but this is where Jesus was tempted, the Mount of Temptation. So, all right. So, and then our way back in, we stopped at this gorgeous place. This place with gorgeous, gorgeous glass. It's in Jericho, but I think it's called Hebron glass.
Right.
Is that right? Yes. And so, Johnny had his spots. He had friends at certain shops where we would stop. And they had bathrooms and tea service. They'd come around and give you hot tea, for your shopping experience. Yeah, and so a lot of us purchased glassware here, just beautiful, beautiful things.
And we all paid different prices for it, because if you knew how to haggle, you could get things cheap, and if you just paid for what it said it was, then you paid more. That's just how it was.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think John and we got all of our stuff for like $1, right?
Right.
No. Hey, how about we stand up and take a quick little shaky and stretch? We only got about 2.5 hours more worth of stuff, but yeah, we just have a couple more things, but it's probably a good time to stretch a little bit, and then John is going to take you into the heart of Jerusalem here with our next day.
Hey.
Sorry, John, I didn't mean to get a killer. I thought people would just stand up. All right, people, come on, we got Jerusalem.
We've got like 4 more days left to talk about.
3, right? Yeah, 3.
Everything happened the last 4 days, 3 days. I know.
How much?
Right. Everything starts at $1,000, and then you have to negotiate down. No, I'm serious. That's how it worked there. Like, everything started really expensive, and then it's like they just threw out the most expensive price you could possibly imagine something could cost. And then you had to just throw an embarrassingly low price back at them.
John, I say you go.
All right. Can everybody out in the narthex, in the gathering space, still hear us? Good. All right, so these pictures aren't terribly important, so I'm just going to talk about them because these are some of those places that are just kind of maybe places that got representative markings. So this is the site of the alleged, well, the ascension happened, but this is allegedly the site. So this is a Crusader-era church, and as you can see, it's a tiny little chapel. I didn't get an inside picture, but maybe 10 people could fit in here standing. So tiny little space, and probably not even 10 people, because half of the floor has this little chunk that you probably shouldn't stand on, because this is allegedly the footprint of Jesus, and they probably don't want you to step there. It's got a glass covering over it. So just one of those cool markers around the perimeter here of the church. Behind the church, there are several altars of the various Christian sects who can't agree on how to worship there. So there's an altar for each one outside the building. Inside the building, there was a folding plastic chair. Who knows? We didn't ask questions. More significantly, this is the Pater Noster. This is the church that is supposed to be the site where Jesus, one of the sites where Jesus taught the apostles the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. So you can see this is kind of the ruins of a much larger structure, probably maybe 2 or 3 structures that had been built on top of each other and then completely demolished. Initially, there are references to Constantine's mother, Helen, all over the place in this part of Jerusalem. She was kind of going around and claiming sites for Constantine before he got there. And so this is a spot that she had identified and decided this is the spot, and her name is on the building. And so around this courtyard are copies of the Lord's Prayer in in several languages. The main two here are Hebrew and Aramaic, and then you really have to hunt for your own language. So eventually, we had to actually go inside the way into what's a much smaller existent church now for English, and this is the King James Version of the Lord's Prayer. And I just thought it was interesting because of the week we happened to be there. This is Ukraine. And then, because Pilvi was with us, this is Finnish. And then we moved on from Pater Noster. So this is all there on the Mount of Olives. We're one mountain over from Jerusalem, and from basically anywhere on that mountain, you've got this great view of the city. And so this was the perfect spot to get on a camel. And look at how happy that camel is. It is, I think, the only non-cat animal that I touched the entire trip. Earlier, Lowell talked about looking from Jerusalem toward the Mount of Olives. We could see the Jewish cemetery, and it just looked like an expanse of tan, like it could have been sand. This is actually, we're in the Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives, and so this is all those crypts built up, and it goes on. I mean, it must have been a mile or 2 miles of crypts it was as far as you could see, just crypts everywhere. And honestly, as you go down toward, you can see the wall of the city of Jerusalem there. You go down toward those trees, and you see walls and walls and walls that are just, as they expanded the city, they just kept building more walls out. That's more cemetery outside the biggest wall that you can see. So, because cemeteries always had to be outside the city wall. Another one of the holy sites that we saw was a church, and again, this is another one of those places where Helen was going around just claiming spots, and this is the spot where Jesus was riding toward the city of Jerusalem for the very first time, and he saw the beauty of the city of Jerusalem, and he wept. So the name of the church is Jesus Wept. And so from inside the church, and it's really hard to tell, but this is basically the same view of the city of Jerusalem that I was just showing you. But from the altar, looking out the window, you can just see the gold dome of the rock through that window. So I'm standing at the pews, and the priest would be blocking the dome of the rock, so I really would have had a crappy view. I hadn't really thought about it that way until just now, but yeah, you wouldn't get to see anything. If you're watching a service in person, you'd have a priest in your way the whole time. But here's the unobstructed view of the city from the Mount of Olives, which was really fantastic. Best view until the last day when we had lunch. We had an actually great view from inside the city. Our next stop was the Church of All Nations, which is the site of the Garden of Gethsemane. So here is the Garden of Gethsemane, which is one of those sites that looks exactly like I pictured it. And olive trees live a really, really long time. Unlike that sycamore tree that Zacchaeus definitely didn't climb in Jericho, these olive trees, the biggest olive trees here actually could be 2,000 years old. The very biggest olive trees could be 2,000 years old. Inside the church, this rock, which is just farther away from the beautiful part of the garden, is the rock where Jesus moved away from the disciples to pray by himself after they fell asleep on him. So this is that rock. There's some you can kind of see the thorns in the ironwork around it, and then some doves there. We're still in the same morning here, believe it or not. We moved on to Lazarus' tomb, and we didn't actually get to see the tomb itself. It was on the other side of a wall, and to get us, the whole group of us, to the other side of the wall would have been too much of an effort, I think. But this is one of those sites that has been built onto and onto and onto and onto and onto. So there's the tomb and the site where the house was, and I kind of got this picture. If you look in the far left edge of the picture, you can see that little yellow bit, and that's the tomb. And then each consecutive layer after that is, you can see how they layered on church after church after church as they build onto this complex over the centuries. And that's just another example of how they added and added and added to these Christian complexes. But here, this is a literal layer. This is dug down into the pavement that we were walking on. This is old pavement that would have been the floor of a church. Now we're outside, but several hundred years ago, this would have been an interior floor of a church, and now they've got it covered with glass poorly that is probably in need of some repair. I'm trying to go kind of fast. I can tell you, having seen some of this stuff and being close to it, we just had the readings for Lazarus a couple weeks ago, and getting to experience it there and being able to identify the geography, knowing we'd been in Galilee, we know where that is, we had been to the Mount of Olives, we knew how far Jesus had traveled at this time, we kind of knew relationally where we, how we were kind of pursuing his ministry. And so it was coming back and then actually experiencing the remainder of Lent has really been eye-opening because you can picture everything so much more clearly as you hear these stories. Even though we're seeing kind of buildings on top of where the sites would have been, it's still, you can still kind of get your head around the geography of it a little bit better. And I thought that was really powerful, especially as we get to the next site. And I covered my timing so well because the computer just completely crashed and I rebooted it during that little sermon. This is the reconstruction of the upper room. This is definitely not where the upper room would have been. This is one of the sites where we know for sure they would not have celebrated Passover here because it's right over King David's tomb. But for some reason, this is where they decided to build the reconstruction of it. But the powerful moment here was Johnny, who sometimes was hard to understand and sometimes rushed us through a lot of stuff. He had a level of knowledge and was able to describe this space to us in such a powerful way. He put us all in a semicircle and said, okay, if you're the most important person in this room, you're going to sit here, and you're going to be able to see all the people coming through the door here. And he had a way of defining this moment that really brought the whole supper to life, and it has nothing to do with any painting you've ever seen. So it was really a very powerful moment. Like I said, it was right over King David's tomb, which is the second most holy site in Judaism. As we went in there, we had to put kippahs on, which is that little head covering that you see Jewish people wear. So we had to. They were just little flimsy ones. They weren't anything fancy. And there were rabbis in there studying and praying and moving It was very powerful. Something I thought was really interesting. How many people have spent enough time in Columbus to know who Jerome Schottenstein is? Yes? Yeah? Schottenstein Center is also, or Schottenstein Furniture is also known as Value City Furniture. Schottenstein is a very wealthy man. There are approximately 0 named places in Jerusalem other than things that are named for, say, King David, or Jesus, or Peter, except for the Jerome Schottenstein School of Torah Heritage, which I thought was just shocking, and it was right outside of King David's tomb. So, go figure. He must be one of, I had no idea, but he must be one of the wealthiest people in the world. I have no idea. Next, we went to Peter in Gallicantu, which means nothing to anybody, except that it's the place where Peter denied Jesus 3 times. This is one of those spots that it's not for certain this is the spot, except that this is very obviously the spot of the high priest's house. And we know that Peter denied Jesus outside the high priest's house. And we know it's the high priest's house because underneath it is a dungeon. And so this potentially is the dungeon where Jesus would have been kept. And this is another one of those powerful reenactments we had from our guide. These are straps that are strapped to the stone wall. And there was this is a separate chamber, which would have been the prison cell, and the only way that prisoners would have been able to get in and out of it was through this hole in the ceiling. That would have been the only source of light, and they would have been raised and lowered out of this dungeon with a rope through this hole. We got to use steps, but we did go down in there. So he did give us a little reenactment of that using one of the Advent Lutheran people. While we were there, it just happened to be during prayer time for the Muslims. And so it's easy to forget because we happen to be on a very Christian-centric tour, but this is the holy city of 3 major religions and some other minor religions too. And so I've got a little video here, and you have to listen because there's some street noise too, but you can hear the Muslim call to prayer in this video. So I'm going to play that now. I'm going to do it one more time. So you can see the Dome of the Rock there. And the street noise. But there are towers in every direction of various mosques playing that sound. And Aaron Lane talking right next to me because he talked all the time. I went to school with him. He and I graduated together from Capital. We're close. So we finished our day. All of that happened, everything I just talked about happened before 3 o'clock. And we finished our day and went back to the hotel. And then Lowell and I decided to go get tattoos. So there's this tattoo shop in Jerusalem. They have been marking pilgrims to the Holy Land since the Crusades. So they've been doing this since 1300 AD, or CE, and the Common Era. And it's the same family. So our tattoo artist was the 28th generation of tattoo artists. So this little shop that they have, you could reach up and touch the ceiling. Art and I will have a whole conversation about how they hid the electrical stuff. It's what you see there is most of the width of the space. believe it, believe it or not. It wasn't very big, and so maybe, 15 feet wide by 20 feet deep? Yeah, really, really little space. So there's Lowell in the chair. And so there's mine, which you can see right there, all healed up.
It's a cat, people.
So you saw the Lion's Gate, right? The Lion's Gate has two other names. The Lion's Gate is also known as Mary's Gate and St. Stephen's Gate. Those are the two other names. So my mom's name is Mary and my stepdad's name is Stephen. I'm just saying, it's not just a cat. And the Lion's Gate looks out over the Mount of Olives. There's an olive tree, and the olive tree is the tree of life. And it's considered that because you can cut an olive tree back to almost nothing, and it will just keep regrowing, which is why those olive trees in Gethsemane are so old. And then this is Lowell's, and you see it looks a little lopsided. We see these garlands that go around things all the time, and it's not always easy to identify what they are. But on the left, that's olive branch, which we've obviously talked about a lot, and we hear about a lot, Mount of Olives, all of that. On the right is a rosemary branch, and rosemary signifies fidelity and purity in Christianity. There's an old wives' tale that the flowers for rosemary used to be white until Mary laid her cloak down on top of them and they became blue, and that's why rosemary flowers are blue. Who knows? But that's a Jerusalem cross in the middle, which is the cross that's now associated with the city of Jerusalem, and a dove, which we think of with the Holy Spirit, and or peace. And then you could think of the two other little stars there as you could think Trinity, so Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's all. So Pastor Lowell got his on his right hand, so that as he shakes hands, as he passes the peace with people, he's passing the peace from the dove. I thought that was nice. All right, I think you're up next.
Okay.
Yeah. Whew. All right. We're almost to the last day.
We really are almost done.
We really are almost done.
I know some of you, like 8:30 is your bedtime, so. Yeah,
We're so close. We're so close.
So the next day, we got up super early again and took off on the Via Dolorosa. And so if you want to know what that is, you can read about it. We're not going to take you through all the stages. Obviously, we don't have a good idea where each of those things were, but these are steps on the journey of Jesus from the time that he was condemned until he was crucified. And so throughout the old city of Jerusalem, there's stations that are marked all over the place. Very powerful time. And again, Johnny did a fantastic job of saying, this is why we think this happened here, or why we think that this happened here. Go ahead, John. Okay, and one of the things that he told us about is that when Jesus was beaten, we don't really have a good idea what that is, but he said it was probably leather straps, that within the leather straps had shards of glass or bone, so that as Jesus was whipped, those things would catch in his flesh, and then so it's not just the whipping that happened, but the pulling away that tore open his flesh. And so this is a big bronze image on one of the doors at I don't know if it's called the Church of Flagellation.
That is.
Okay,
yep.
Okay, right. And so that was one of the very first stops there, is where Jesus was beaten. And then this is just as we're walking along to give you a little bit of sense. I mean, you just cannot imagine the altitude that happens inside the old city of Jerusalem. I mean, serious, like, ups and downs that you just, I don't know, I had forgotten, about that. And what you can see here is, because people just drive in there, these some of the stairs have little cobblestone ramp areas for mopeds or go-karts or cars or whatever people are driving in there, so.
We would not put it past anybody to drive an actual car up those steps. For real, like,
Or like a big delivery truck, you know, all of a sudden you hear a delivery truck coming down the stairs. Just unbelievable. Yeah, so,
nowhere was safe.
yeah. Okay, so here's one of the different, that's the fifth stop on there, and everywhere it's in Hebrew and it's in Arabic and it's in English as we're going along. So, yeah, this is called the Game of Kings, and what this was a game that was well known, and I don't think we have the pictures in here following it, but what you see there, that brownish thing, is picture of the stone pavement that's back there. And so not unlike kids that, you know, do tic-tac-toe in sidewalk chalk, you know, on the sidewalk or whatever. These soldiers at that time who were taking care of prisoners got really bored, and so they'd be playing whatever games. And so this is a place that is called the King's Game, and depending which way your marble or your rock goes determines what happens. And so I don't know if you can read that there, but it says, a dice game to the god Saturn, which was played more intensely during his feast. The players took different identities. Slaves were considered free men while you're playing the game. During the game, a prisoner condemned to death was chosen to be king for the day. Part of the robe and the crown and all that stuff that we hear about in the Jesus story. He could do whatever he wanted for that day, but at sundown, he would be killed. Okay, and so part of this and another place that we saw also, you could see in the pavement where these games were played, and we hear about the soldiers playing games, you know, choosing lots of who was going to get Jesus' clothes and things like that. And so this was, again, one of those, Johnny did just such an amazing job as we were going along the Via Dolorosa of painting a picture, even if it wasn't at this specific place. Boy, there was a lot of evidence that would have been a place where Jesus would have been held in the midst of his march to Golgotha. Go ahead, John. Yes, just some more of the images as we're walking on the Via Dolorosa. Here we are, you know, I mean, just super tight. And then all day, every day, you see pilgrims that are walking along, carrying the cross, singing hymns that are retracing those steps. And so this was actually later in the day when we came across a group of maybe just a dozen or 24 people, but they're carrying the cross and singing songs. They were singing in Spanish, and one guy, you know, was playing a guitar, and they were just singing hymns as they marched. Really powerful to think about that just happens all day, every day there. Yeah. Oh, that's me. I'm done? Okay. Okay, all right. Joan is going to talk.
They're knocked down, they're built on, they're knocked down, they're built on, and they're knocked down. And one of the histories of this church is that because of all the things that happened within this church, the Romans were upset because pilgrims kept coming there. And so they got rid of the Christian shrines and built a temple to Aphrodite there. So that would discourage the Christians from going there. But then, of course, the tide turned on them. Another group came in. It burned down a few times. Anyway, this church has been around, but it just keeps coming back because there's such a strong belief that this was the area where the crucifixion took place. And at this church, we're now in the Christian quarter of Jerusalem. You know, when we were in Gallicantu, we were in a Muslim section, and there's 4 quarters, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is in the center of the Christian quarter, and it's at the end of the Stations of the Cross. And go to my next slide for me. This is the courtyard outside of the church, and you know, it doesn't really look very churchy at all, but what I want to point out to you that was really significant to me, like Sue, this is my second trip there. and I was there in 2015. And when we went there, we did not go at the crack of dawn, as Johnny had us go. And the place was just a zoo, a complete and total zoo. There were people all over the place. There were services going on. It was loud. It was noisy. It was just very not worshipful. But we got there early, and as you can see, we pretty much had that area to ourselves. And while this church is now within the walls of Jerusalem, which only date back to the 16th century, the location of the church is outside of the original walls of the city as it existed at the time of Jesus. And, you know, it was just really unusual for us to have such a open access to this area. And on this spot in the plaza there is one of the last stations of the cross, and this is traditionally where Jesus was stripped of his garments. And as Lowell was talking about, they played the games and cast lots for his garments there. And upon entering the church, in the main door there, if you take a hard right, you, again, he talked about going up and down in Jerusalem. We went up and down in this church. You ascend up a bunch of stairs into a chapel. And that is considered the place of Golgotha or a Calvary. And it was a noticeable climb. I mean, you had to do a number of steps to get up there. And in the chapel, there were many, many mosaics. Along the arch there, you can see those are tiny mosaics. And this is a mosaic scene depicting the women as Jesus is nailed to the cross. And so there was all kinds of beautiful things in this chapel. And the next one, this is a shot from when I was there in 2015. I want to point out, you know, there's lots of people there. You had to queue up to get to this altar and wait quite a while. And then next shot, John. And meanwhile, like, this guy's changing out the lights and, you know, all this stuff was going on. I just felt like it was a complete and total zoo. And this contrasts with how it was. Now it's darker here. They hadn't apparently done the lights yet, but you can see there's very few people around. This is just our group. And we were able to go up to this altar, and when you kneel at this altar, you can see the stone of Calvary, and there's like a divot in it where supposedly the cross was placed. And so you can kneel down and look at that yourself, and you can also kind of see that bright side stuff there. That's glass over this rock. But we were able to, you know, take our time up there. It was wonderful. I think I've got one more from up there.
Nope.
No,
That's it.
okay. Then after we finished up there, you walk down, you hit the next one, and this is a shot, I credit Aaron Lane with this one. He has a much better camera than I do. And this is overlooking the entrance to the church is to the left there between those pillars. And this stone is sitting here in this little rack, and it's called the Stone of Unction. And this is, again, this stone is not ancient. This is not any, and no one's pretending it is. But this is the traditional spot where Jesus' body, you know, this is as we come down from Calvary. They laid it there before they placed it into the tomb. And so this is, again, when we talked about the different religions, and in this particular stone is very much, very highly revered by the Greek Orthodox folks. And I think Aaron had a picture where he's got a woman who's kneeling and leaning and kissing the stone. People would do that. But again, I want you to notice there's nobody there. Yeah. We just got to be there and just really take in this massive place. And that was, to me, a wonderful, wonderful gift. From there, there's also this wonderful mosaic, which is, again, a modern mosaic, but it depicts Jesus being taken down from the cross, laid on that stone, and it's right in front of, or in back of that stone, and then being placed in the tomb. And to the left of that stone, we walk into the area where the shrine is that's over the tomb of Jesus. Now, again, this shrine itself dates back only to the 1800s. But this church, again, has been burned down, knocked down, all these different eras have come up. But this is a shrine that's sitting over the top of where, far below, is the grave of Jesus. And I think they had a stone that was on a pedestal in the first chamber that you went in there, and that was supposedly from the stone that was rolled against the doorway. And here's our group queuing up. But when we went there in 2015, we were not even able to go inside because the wait to get inside was several hours long. So the fact that we just kind of waltzed in there and went, and then we also had time. The next shot, I think, is of us. We just could sit there, and again, notice there's no people, and this is in front of that shrine, and just contemplate and have our own thoughts. And it was just a wonderful meditative spot. And of course, so as this is Holy Week, here you've got Good Friday all the way to Easter, basically, in this one church. And very interesting place. And again, we were just so very blessed to have had the time. And that was one of the few spots that Johnny did not keep us moving at a breakneck pace. You know, we really, I felt we're not rushed through there. And that was a real gift to me. So thank you very much.
All right, we're getting close to the end of this day. So next we got to visit the. Actually, next we went to a gift shop. I'm not going to lie. We went to a lot of gift shops, but then after that we went to the Lutheran Church, which is like a block, what we would think of as a block away from Holy Sepulchre. It was another spot. It didn't used to always be a church. It was someone's palace. It got donated to the Evangelical Lutheran Church and was turned into a church relatively recently, like 200 years ago, right? When Germany was Prussia, you know. So we, the significant thing that, well, a couple of things. Something that we didn't really get to see there because the basement was closed. Like Joan was talking about, the Holy Sepulchre would have been outside the city walls. For a long time, there wasn't a whole lot of historical proof where the city walls used to be. As they were building the Lutheran Church, in the basement of the Lutheran Church, they discovered remains of city walls that solidly put Holy Sepulchre outside the ancient city walls of Jerusalem. So that's very significant that happens to be where the Lutheran Church is now. While we were there, the coolest part, there's not much to that church. If you can see, it's very Lutheran. It's not Catholic, it's Lutheran. So we had our version of a dance-off. We sang several hymns. I've got just a little bit of one here. So there's more of the recording, but I didn't want to take all night with it. And then we were treated by the music director at the church. So Brian turned the volume down for you, but the original volume was closer to the way we heard it. Just so you know. After that, we moved on to the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. And this is the part where Lowell and I didn't really plan this part of our remarks, so we're just kind of riffing. This is the most holy site in Judaism. This is not really the western wall of the temple. This is the western retaining wall of the land on which the temple sat. But it's as close as the Jewish people can get now because the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim holy site, sits on the land above this. So this is now the closest that the Jewish people can get to the Holy Land on the top of Zion, basically. This was the other spot where we had to wear our kippas, and men and women had to see this separately. So you see on the side of the picture that you can see, men are at the wall. To the right of this picture, on the other side of these white walls, there are women, and men were able to go inside this building because women obviously can't read. There's a library in there where men were able to read the Torah and many, many other holy books that women do not have access to. I'm just saying. So.
On the women's side, there was a bookcase of books that they could, and there were station chairs and tables that the women. So it was just, but it was an outside,
Yeah.
a bookcase in the outside area.
There were.
Women's side was very small. The men's side
Yes, there was much more room for the men.
And you really had to wait your turn.
Yes. And there were places all over where you could, I didn't do this myself, so I don't know if you were borrowing or renting. I assume you were probably renting. Scripture that you could tie to your arm and to your head, because the Bible says, keep the scripture on your arm and on your, between your eyes and all that. So, literally, it's in a little box that gets tied on a leather strap that you tie to your head or to your arm, and then they go to the wall to pray. So and you can see the size of this. It's a retaining wall. It really is a big retaining wall. And then this is Pastor Aaron and another gentleman from our group who wasn't actually from our church or Advent. He was from one of the Virginia churches that ended up joining us at the last minute. So we had a lot of free time walking through the city on this particular day, and one of the things we really, really enjoyed was going through the markets. And so I'm just going to whiz through these pictures. I told you how small the tattoo shop was. All these shops are even smaller, 8 feet wide, sometimes less, sometimes only 6 feet wide. You could just kind of shimmy down the aisle. Sometimes you couldn't even, you just had to point at what you wanted, and the salesperson would just give it to you. You still had to negotiate for the price. But food, spices, candy left out in the open. Don't worry, there were no mice. Plenty of cats. That's a giant pile of strawberries. They were beautiful and fresh.
Nuts and figs.
Nuts and figs and probably legumes and stuff. Here, a lot of textiles and souvenirs and things like that. And then there was this magical shop where Lowell and I spent quite a bit of time. Lowell spent more time here than I did, and so Lowell found some instruments. This is Lowell's collection from a couple trips, and I don't know if you'll eventually talk about these a little bit. And then I ended up purchasing this. This is called an oud, and it's a Middle Eastern string instrument. And if you come up here and look at it later, the neck of it bends. It has 12 strings. It kind of tunes like a mandolin, but if you don't know what that is, then it doesn't mean anything to you. So this is the other half of the shop where all the string instruments sit. Some more shop pictures. Most of Jerusalem is a shopping mall, really. And bread. Oh my gosh, the bread. I cannot believe I'm not 20 pounds heavier than I am. And then the last stop, is anyone talking about the Garden Tomb, or is this still me?
Yeah, you can. Go
Okay.
ahead.
The last stop was the Garden Tomb. This is more of a symbolic tomb than a literal tomb. This is a spot that was found around the same time the Lutheran Church was being built. So while we didn't know where that exterior wall to the city of Jerusalem was, people were really trying to nail down historically where Jesus really should have been buried. And so one of the spots was this one. And it's beautiful. They've done beautiful work to make it a holy place to meditate, but probably not the real tomb site. This is an old, a late 1800s picture, and you can kind of see what looks like eye sockets So you can see why they might have thought this is the rock of the skull, you know, Golgotha. But as humans, we tend to think that a lot of things look like faces. Like, that's why we think there's a man on the moon and a face on Mars. And so this is what they think is the actual tomb. This is an actual tomb. You could plainly tell when you go in there that someone was probably buried there. Whether it was Jesus or not, that's another thing. We're to the last day. And when I say the last day, we're talking like a morning and then we get on a plane.
Yeah. So to come back, we had to get a test. And so the place where we got our test was at Augusta Victoria Hospital. And you can probably see that this hospital was built with funds and effort from the Lutheran World Federation and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. So the ELCA is partially responsible for the building of this hospital where we got our test. And so it's up on the Mount of Olives, and they do amazing work. And so if you're interested, look up Augusta Victoria Hospital. This is a picture of the hospital. I didn't get a picture of any of us getting a swab up our nose.
If you want a thorough COVID test,
yeah,
you can make sure that they get every little bit of your brain.
We all came out with our eyes watering from this test, yeah. So, but up here on the Mount of Olives, I mean, you can see how lush it is here and everything, but looking out the back of that, you can see out there into that it turns wildernessy pretty quick and is no longer like City of Jerusalem stuff that's happening. So that happened at like 10:30 or 11 or something like that. And then we had a free day the rest of the day. And so some people chose to do different things. And so Jill's going to talk about lunch in the Old City. And then Denise is going to come back up and talk about the Israel Museum. And then you get to go. Sound good? Okay.
My name is Jill, and my husband and I attend the 9:30 service. And I wish I would have gotten to speak first so my story wouldn't sound so boring. I'll do my best, but I wanted to share my experience that happened on our last day of our trip. We decided to visit the streets of Old Jerusalem versus the Israel Museum, and I'm glad we did. We shopped the market area, and then my husband and I wandered away from everyone, and we found a little restaurant called the Old Danish Tea House, and it was tucked way back in the corner. And we met back up with Lois and Jeff Hills and Lori Vesper, and we all said how nice it would be to sit down and get some tea and coffee. And so we mentioned that restaurant and decided to go there. And as we learned, it was the third generation owned and operated. Our waiter was the grandson of the original proprietor, and he was very accommodating and friendly. What was supposed to be just drinks turned into a full-blown meal. We started with hot tea and fresh mint and espressos, and then we ordered hummus, kibbe, and falafel. And he explained everything about what we were eating, and then he brought out another small appetizer that he wanted us to taste at no charge. And it was eggplant mixed in some fashion. Everything was so fresh. And my fresh eye experience was how accommodating our waiter was. No matter what our request was, he complied and he smiled. And along with this, he started off as our waiter, and then I saw him making the espressos, the tea, and I swear I think he was even doing some of the cooking. And then he took away the apron and he came out and he had on black, all black, and this big red scarf right around his neck. And we've been warned by Johnny, our tour guide, to watch your money and your personal belongings because there are a lot of thieves, but we never felt threatened. And I really felt it was a trip of a lifetime, and I got to know a lot of the people from church on a more personal level, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you.
Jill and I bonded over some cats.
And the last piece, they are business rights. I didn't think of that right when I was talking before. So
want to, okay.
Which one, are you doing visitation first or the?
Let's do the museum first.
Okay.
This was at the, I think there was Jay and Jonathan and myself were the only members from the Lord of Life group, and then the Pastor Aaron's group, there were a larger portion of them who attended this. I'm not shocked. And so I decided I would rather do another church in the museum. So first we stopped at the Israeli Museum. This is a 1 to 50 scale model of Old Jerusalem. And so you can walk all the way around it from the top or down below where you get a sense of where all the different buildings were situated. And Johnny, spent a lot of time explaining where all the different buildings were and that sort of thing. But this is, we spent a lot of time outside on this. And then I think we have a picture in here of next slide. The Israeli Museum, you could spend, it's like most of, like our museums, some of the museums here, you could spend 2 or 3 days, well, leave it below, it's okay. You could spend 2 or 3 days going through the museum. We had like 90 minutes. But we saw a few things. We did see what's called the Shrine of the Book. That's where they actually have a separate building where they house the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so as Pastor Lowell said, the entire book of Isaiah is intact, and they actually had it on display, plus a lot of the individual segments, and they had a lot of the history, some of the sectarian stuff where, like, don't eat this or don't sit here. And it was actually, they took those and put them in context, which was kind of interesting. Those of you who maybe a few years ago, I think we figured it was 2012, 17? I can't remember now, when they had the Dead Sea Scrolls, pieces of it here in Cincinnati. But this was just a whole building devoted to it. Then we went to the Church of the Visitation. This is the top, where we were up at the top. It was, I know, it was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but it's like 100, at least 100 steps, straight up, okay? And I didn't have any water. By the time I got to the top, it was like, I'm dying, I mean, it is, it's hot, and it's, and it's straight up. But it's a beautiful view. This is the view from the top. Now, the Church of the Visitation, if you go to the next slide, I think, is where Mary went to visit Elizabeth and to tell her when that she was pregnant. And it was here's this scripture where it says that Elizabeth said that John leapt in her womb when they met. And this and there was the Magnificat, which it's kind of like the Pater
Noster,
where there are different languages all spread around a courtyard. And so here's the one in English, and it was kind of the church is there. It's built over. This is supposedly their Elizabeth. It's not their home. Was the church, and they have it's a modern sculpture. I thought it was very poignant. To see the Mary and Elizabeth there, both pregnant and meeting. But there's a rock of concealment within. There it is, within the church, and it supposedly is the rock that they hid John behind when Herod had sent out the soldiers or men to kill all the newborn males, and so that's part of this church. And it was just kind of it was a large trek up, but it was really a very beautiful area. I even got pictures of cats and pipe organs for John, because he wasn't there, so I got the
other slideshow.
So I want to just reiterate what everybody else said. This was a phenomenal trip, and I'm booking for 2 years from now. I really did. It was phenomenal. So
thank you.
Yeah.
we've got a little wrap-up video here from Pilvi, because she obviously couldn't be here tonight. So this is a video that she sent to us.
Hello. I wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed this trip to the Holy Land. This was my very first, and I enjoyed it so much. I loved seeing my old friends and meeting new friends. That was very special. I loved spending the time with Rosemary. I love you so much. You are the coolest person. Pastor Lowell, John Johns, and everybody. I love you so much. It was such a good to reunite with you guys in the Holy Land. Oh my gosh. All the places that we visited somehow resonates with me forever. I know that. I think the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee were the places that touched my heart at the moment the most. I think they felt very authentic. Those were two places that I could feel the Spirit really strongly, and I savor that feeling and that memory forever. Obviously, all the other places too. Oh my gosh, reading the Bible now will never be the same. So I think that's really cool. I got this little cross for my friend who is recovering from back surgery. So I can't wait to see her and give this to her. I didn't buy much souvenirs, so that's why this cross that was a gift from our guide, Johnny, is really special because I like to hold it as I pray. And the cup that we got to keep after communion, this is very special to me too. What can I say? I loved my trip in every level. I felt like I was eating healthy. I loved the colors on the plates, and I love the colors. I don't know. I love the colors everywhere. The beautiful art, and in Old City, the marketplaces, they were so cool. Everywhere you looked, there was something to see, and I think we even visited a tattoo place at one night. That was something. Anyways, I didn't come home with the tattoo. Maybe next time, because I am going to visit the Holy Land again, definitely. Now, happy Easter, everybody. I've done some decorating. I hope to see you soon. I love you guys.
Well, really, we're done now. We're done now. Thank you. We went way longer than we thought. Oh, that's just our flight home if you want to know where we were going on our flight home. And oh my gosh, for those of you who spoke tonight, for those of you who went on the trip, for those of you who prayed, for those of you who provided food tonight, what a gift, and thank you for coming to listen. We're sorry that you're going to be hearing these stories over and over and over, especially in sermons the coming week, and all kinds of stuff. And we are working on a trip for 2 years from now, so spring of 24. So if you went and want to go again, or if you didn't get to go and you're thinking, man, I really want to go, and if 24 doesn't work, John and I are excited about maybe going in spring of 26 and just like making this a regular thing. So we were blessed, and I know those who have been there before. We're blessed going back again, and so there's always more to see and learn and ways to experience Jesus in those places again and again. So please feel free to look at the stuff up here and ask questions, and there's still some food out there, and thank you so much for coming tonight.